Hey, everybody. Welcome to this Friday edition of Pastoral Devotions. My name is Jonathan, and I'm excited to share with you, our family at First Baptist Church Lake Butler, another devotional thought. And I'm sticking with the book of Psalms. So I wanted to share with you today Psalm 110. Psalm 110. So if you've got a Bible or you use your smartphone, just turn it on. Let's go to Psalm 110 together. Psalm 110 is what we call a royal psalm, where there's a lot of language about a king, kingdom, authority, power, might, all that kind of stuff. And we read in the superscription of this psalm that it is a psalm of David. And David, if you know the history of the Old Testament, was basically unmatched in his fame and his renown and his power and just kind of the status that he got to. God himself even called David a man after his own heart. So David's a big deal. But also he's a big deal in terms of the way we read the Bible, because God promised to David in 2 Samuel 7 that somebody from his line is always going to be king, which is crazy. It's an amazingly big promise to tell somebody that from your line, there's always going to be somebody established as king, that his line will never end. So David's received this promise. He even prays right after that. He's like, Lord, that is amazing. I don't know even how to respond to that. Thank you. And David is now, I think, reflecting a little bit more on that promise here in Psalm 110. He gets this vision, and as we read this, I want you to envision, try to put yourself into this psalm. Imagine kind of a big throne room. Maybe like if you've read Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah goes and he sees the Lord sitting on his throne. I know that's hard to imagine, but just imagine like it's beautiful. You're in there. You're kind of full of awe and wonder. And then suddenly you hear a voice. Verse 1. Yahweh says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs over the whole earth. He will drink from the brook by the way. Therefore, he will lift up his head. Now, I think at first reading, you might be a little bit confused. So was I. We first need to sort out in verse 1 what is going on. So if you're reading in the ESV or in other translations like it, the first Lord that shows up is capital O, capital L, O, R, D, which is the divine name, that is Yahweh. So this is Yahweh speaking. We're in his throne room. He says, and then David says that Yahweh speaks to David's Lord. Okay, so David is thinking about this kind of mysterious person who's going to come, who now, as we see in verse 1, gets authority from Yahweh. Yahweh says to this guy who David respects and David worships and reveres, who is now going to have authority with God. It's similar in Daniel chapter 7 when Yahweh says to this Son of Man, come here and I'll give you dominion. And the Son of Man is elevated and given the status of Yahweh. I mean, it's crazy. So here, the Lord is saying to this person that David reveres. And Yahweh says, sit at my right hand. Now, if you sit at somebody's right hand, this is a symbol of status and authority. You know, that's where we get you're my right hand man kind of thing. It's you are not only their representative, but you have their status. You kind of bear their image and power. So this person whom David respects is given Yahweh's authority. And then as we read the rest of the psalm, verses 2 through 7, this guy this coming one, this future king, subdues his enemies. He gets authority over everybody. It's even kind of conquering language in verse 6. He'll execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. Like, what do we do with that? Well, I do think we need to remember that the conquering coming king, the Messiah who was predicted to come, in Jewish minds, they thought, yeah, he's going to be a military leader. He's going to come with a sword and everyone's going to bow down to him. But we have to notice in verse 4 this very interesting line that says, "You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." Now, Melchizedek was this weird figure who shows up in Genesis 14, who is this guy who is a king. He's the king of Salem, which later becomes Jerusalem. He's not only a king, but he's also actually a priest. And we see this even in the geography of how Israel is set up. The temple is right next to where the king lives in the palace. So even in the way that Jews expected this to happen, they believed that there would come one day where the role of high priest, which is separate, and the role of king would become one. And I think that's really important for understanding this. So this person that David sees is going to be a priest, but also going to be a king. He's going to have Yahweh's authority, and he is going to subdue the nations. Somehow he's going to conquer all nations. Now, what's amazing, and what I think is our devotional thought, and what can actually be encouraging from this, is when Jesus comes on the scene, this nobody from the land of Nazareth comes and he says, "This is me. I am this coming one. The coming one is here, and it's me. I'm the Son of Man who has the same status as Yahweh, and I'm going to show that by doing all these miracles." When Jesus came, brothers and sisters, he came claiming to be this Messiah, this priest and this king, who now conquers the nations through the church, through the kingdom moving forward. For people whose status was enemy and those who hate God, and them believing in Jesus and then being transferred into that new family of God, the family of love, getting to share and partake in who God is in the Trinity. It's amazing. So ultimately, Jesus does shatter. He does bring judgment. He does fill the world with his presence, but in a very unexpected way. And I just think the things that God does, they're amazing. So be encouraged that Jesus is king, that he is the one whom the Old Testament had pointed to, and he is now the one who reigns. So here's my question. Will you follow his leadership? Will you submit to King Jesus in everything? Will you follow him with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? I pray that you would be really considering that, especially as we move towards our sermon on Matthew 22 this Sunday. And I pray that we would all be a people who submit to this king, this priest and king who is reigning and who is glorified forever. Thank y'all. I will see you later. I love you guys.